Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good and the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and this is going to be a great podcast, and I can't really tell you exactly why, because, well, there's just things going on in the studio here that are different than all the other times we've ever done this. We spent like a long time getting all the computers working and microphones and the tornado. Zach, Harry, a tornado came zipping through when we were getting set up here. A tornado, all right?
Yeah,
it is amazing. Yeah. So anyway, okay. So I'm Rafe. Harry's on the line. Zach is in the background, keeping everything sane these days. All right. So Harry, how have you been?
I'm doing well. I'm finally back home, and it feels absolutely great to be here. There's so many good things about where I live, and the most important thing about where I live is my family. So that's what I'm thankful for tonight.
Did you ever get your luggage back?
No, I'm still 2 for 3 on luggage.
2 out of 3 on luggage. All right. So, hey, that will be an episode for another day. But, hey, for the time being, before I go any further, thanks to all the listeners for being there. We appreciate you being here, and we really we need you guys, and we appreciate the fact that you are here. If you are new to the podcast, hey, give us a couple episodes. See if we don't give you a reason to come back. And hit that little subscribe button and make sure that you, that you get all the Bufnagle goodness that you can. Harry, I was talking to one of our listeners the other day, and he said he was getting gas he actually said this. He was getting gas at the gas pump, and that little guy who reads the news said, make sure you listen to the Buff. So, hey, we are on Apple Podcast and Spotify and all over the interwebs, and hit that button. Hit the likes, give us 5 stars, and that's what we need to do. So that's where we are, and we're going to talk about something very interesting today. So, Harry, it's great where you are because your family's there, and it's great where I am, where my family's here. And there are some nice things about everywhere everybody lives. And one of the nice things about where I live is and I've mentioned this before, is this rail trail that runs through. It goes through Indianapolis from up north down south. It is the Monon Rail Trail, and I was riding that the other day, and I tell you, it is. There are civic things in different cities that people have. They have the stadium and they have the museum, and man, this rail trail is a phenomenal thing, and it got me thinking about rail trails.
Yeah, and there's a whole ton of these across the U.S. Right? We've done not only rail trails, but general like Civil War trails and historic trails, and all of them that we've been on have been a lot of like biking adventures.
Yeah, and so the thing about rail trails, okay, so I was looking this up because I've done a lot of rail trails in my 9,000 years on the planet, and so there's 3 things that apparently make rail trails really, really special, and they're all right. So this is on, this is pretty well known among the rail trail community. Okay, they have gentle grades, meaning the hills are pretty low, okay, because the railroads used to go on them. Okay, yeah. They have really great engineering. Right, bridges and tunnels and nice smooth. You're not going to run into sharp corners.
Sure,
you're not going to run off into the creek, right? And like you said, they go through historical areas, and they go through areas where people wanted to get to years ago, and typically along riverbeds and through sometimes right through downtowns of major cities, and they are wonderful components of the good civil society.
Yeah, and if you can imagine just being able to go from point A to point B in an era with or without, vehicular travel, it's still nice. Maybe one day you'll be living there in Indianapolis, and I'll be living, 20 or 30 miles away. Maybe not that much, but then a quick hop along the trail, having the kids go see Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah, we live close enough. I have biked down. I had to. Just drop a car at it's pouring down rain now. The tornado is coming. It's coming back. The tornado is coming back. All right, so and I hopped on I hopped in the car. I drove the car down there with my bike in the car, and then I got on my bike and I rode it back. And it took me a while. It was it tends to be uphill from your sister's house here, even though it's all along the trail. But it is a wonderful ride, and a lot of when we were in Raleigh, there were a lot of greenway parks along urban corridors that are where riverbeds go. You can't build along the river, right? So they put those things there. Now, I got to tell you, my first experience with the rail trail concept was the early 70s. Okay, so this was like the reason it was my first experience with the rail trails is because A, I was a little kid and I didn't have any experience before that. But B, there weren't any rail trails before that. Okay, I rode, I believe it was probably 70. I don't know, 72 maybe, 73, something. It was that
so
time.
Just old enough to remember.
Yeah, right. So age of 7 is when you start really getting these things. And I remember this, and my little sister was probably 4 or 5. So maybe I was 8. All right, so it would have been 73. Yeah, 73. The Elroy-Sparta Bike Trail opened up in southwestern or maybe just western Wisconsin. And it was the first rail trail in the United States. That trail was abandoned by the Chicago and Northwestern Railway in 1964, and in 1967 the Wisconsin Conservation Commission, which is now the Department of Natural Resources, they bought the rail line for $12,000.
Well, shoot, let's go buy one for ourselves.
Yeah, so $12,000. Here's what you get for the unbelievably low price of $12,000. You get 34 miles of smooth grade or low grade, 30 feet, however wide a railroad right of way is, and it goes through 5 little towns, and there are 3 tunnels through the rolling hills of southwestern Wisconsin. And they turned this thing into the first rail trail, and we biked it within a couple of years of it being there. And the other thing that's interesting, Harry. Okay, so your grandmother, my mom, she grew up in one of the towns along this route. Okay, so she lived. Her father ran the mill in Norwalk, Wisconsin, and that was one of the towns. Okay, there's 5 towns. It's Elroy, Kendall, Wilton, Norwalk, and Sparta. Okay, so my mom grew up in Norwalk, and she had cousins, I think, that lived in Kendall, which is like 2 towns down. And they used to, like, when they were little kids, she and her sister would like run down, get on the train, and ride the train down to Kendall in the morning. And then when the afternoon train came back through, they'd hop on the train and ride back. It was all like 15 miles or something like that, but it was too far to bike as a little kid. And her mother didn't drive, and Dad was at the mill. So if you wanted to go play with your cousins down the other town, you had to hop on the train. And this was back in the day, because I asked her the other day, I said, were the locomotives, okay, so this would have been like in the 40s and the 50s? Mm-hmm. Were these the puffer billies? Were these the big steam locomotives that when they go, they are a spectacle, steam shooting everywhere and smoke going up and
fireworks coming out the side or whatever?
That's right. And guys shoveling coal into the thing and like Doc Brown, trying to get it up to 88 miles an hour so he can save the school teacher. Right. But she rode the steam trains back and forth on this little route. And here it was 25 years later or 30 years later that she was on a bike with her husband and the 4 little kids, and we were biking this line that she had ridden as a kid.
Yeah, and that's pretty incredible, right? You think that technology and transportation is suddenly going to increase, but it's really the removal of this fantastic invention that lets you actually go see what you want to do by riding on a 2-wheeled vehicle with a couple of gears and a chain.
Yeah, yeah. That was the rail trails are so great because of that. They get you either out into the woods relatively easily and safely, and you spend very little time. You spend little time talking about or worrying about about traffic. I mean, there's very little time. There are some road crossings that you get to. I guess they're called grade crossings,
Yep.
We'll get mad at us if we improperly label them. But you get out and you get to ride. You just ride. It's quiet, and all you hear the of your wheels going on the gravel. Most of these trails are crushed limestone, which becomes like concrete once it gets a little bit wet and a lot of tires on them. Mm-hmm. And this is a great thing to do. So if you're in Wisconsin, and I know some of you listeners are, go out and do the Elroy-Sparta Trail, and it connects. Here, I looked this up. It is now connected to 5 other trails in southwestern Wisconsin, and that is some of those.
So we're now traveling more than just 35 miles at a time, city to city.
Yeah, so
you probably get all over southwestern Wisconsin.
Yeah. So I think that, well, it's hard to say where the terminus is, because some of these they go down and then they branch off to different places, because having a rail line was a lot different than an airline. All right. So, you built the track and then you drove to these little towns and you stopped along the way. The reason there were so many stops on this route, right? Elroy to Sparta is like 34 miles, but there were 1, 2, 3 stops in between. There was Kendall, Wilton, and Norwalk, and they had to stop and they had to get fuel, and they had to get
new coal shovers.
Well, and water for the steam, right? So you're doing so okay. So anyway, so there's 5 other trails on here, and I think you can go all the way from La Crosse down to like New Glarus or Madison now. I mean, it's and they're everywhere, and these are wonderful ways to get out and see the country. Great exercise. It's good for the environment, good for you, good for your mindset, and that is it is a wonderful thing to ride these trails. Now, 34 miles seems like a long ways.
Sure.
That is not the longest trail in the United States. There's a couple that are substantially longer. Okay, there's the Ohio to Erie Trail, which goes from the Ohio River up to Lake Erie through the state of Ohio. It's 326 miles. There's the Cowboy Trail in Nebraska, which when it's completed will be 321 miles across Nebraska. So that's there you go.
Quick workout. Here's a 300-mile trail you can do.
Yeah, well, you go there and you got to come back, right? All right, and then there's the Katy Trail, which is a really wonderful one in Missouri. It goes from just southeast of Kansas City across, goes up a little bit, hits the Missouri River, and then pretty much follows the Missouri River all the way to where it hits the Mississippi.
So you're telling me I just want to go downhill that entire time?
Well, okay, that is the thing. Now, when you go and do the Elroy-Sparta Trail, the towns are the towns, but between them they go, there's a grade up and then there's a grade down, and most of the time it's grade up to the tunnel.
Sure.
That's where the hill gets too steep, then they dig through, and then they go back down the other side. And so there are places you can feel the grade, and some of them get pretty steep, but for the most part, it's not like riding the hills. I mean, unless you like hills, I guess. So anyway, that's that. Now you went with us on one of these trails, but we didn't do a rail trail. We did the Erie Canal bike ride.
We did, and you mentioned earlier the crushed limestone.
Yeah,
and I was trying to slowly find a way in without my webcam self here to segue in for you. But there wasn't crushed limestone on that trail, if I remember right. There were definitely a couple instances where it was heavy sand or heavy gravel, one or the other, sometimes both, that made our daily journey really, really tough.
Yeah, so we biked from the Erie Canal. We did the Erie Canal ride, okay, but not with. Okay, so if you
wasn't necessarily a trail or a rail trail.
Well, some of it was, and some of it wasn't. Okay, so we went in 2014, summer 2014.
Oh, was it summer 2014?
Yeah. So Harry and I and Olivia went and rode from Buffalo to Albany, and a good portion of that ride is along the Erie Canal, along what they call the tow path, right? So the barge would be in the canal, and then you'd have a horse, which would be dragging the barge along, and there's a rope out there, and a guy walks along with the horse and entices the horse to keep going, and that keeps the barge moving. And we rode that, and that was pretty good. But you're right; there were places on this trail, like when the very nice pieces of the canal stopped, that they were not really good condition. I remember some really heavy sand pieces, or there had been like washout from heavy rains or something like that, and whoever was in charge of maintenance didn't do a very good job.
washout or branches, or suddenly the trail kind of ends, and then you need a map, right? Because maps are important to tell you where to go. And then your father leaves the map
I
10
didn't.
miles behind you.
It wasn't that far, but it was a lot farther than I realized. Okay, so we were on. Was it the first day?
It was first or second day.
Yeah, second day.
It's enough for us to realize that we had some long days ahead of us.
Yeah, we did. So we did 360 miles in 6 days. So that's 60 miles a day. And you know what? That seemed to me at the time, I was like, 60 miles. How hard could that be?
Yeah, for people who don't train on bicycles.
Well, I figured the first couple of days would be training, right? And then the next couple of days would be just be post
trial by fire.
Yeah. So no, we did. We stopped at an ice cream shop, like I am apt to do, and I put the map down on that. I remember it was on a wooden post on by the parking lot, right? And then we started going, and we were going to Lockport.
Oh, I don't remember the city names.
Well, there's a couple places, right? So you have locks, right, along the canal. And this place, there were 5 locks, and I think the canal dropped something like 100 feet or something like that, a lot in Lockport. We could look it up. It dropped a lock in Lockport.
All right. Well, there's our pun of the day.
All right. So we did that, and it took us 6 days, and we didn't. No, you can do it. What we didn't do, Harry, is we didn't do the official ride that you can do with the state of New York. Okay, the state of New York Parks and Trails does their official ride, and they will. It's called a supported ride, so you just ride, and they take your luggage and stuff, and they set up all your tents, and you have this big camp out in this big park, and they cook dinner for you, and then you get up the next morning, you ride again. They pack everything up, they drive it to the next stop, and you do it again. And I think they did it over 8 days. Like probably a Sunday through a Sunday. Would that be 8 days? Yeah.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so they did that. But we did the Canal Trail, which I thought was phenomenal. It was great. It was good. Would you want to do it with the group?
Oh, goodness. I think the bigger the group, the harder it gets. Just because your disparity of ability increases.
Yeah, I guess you got to have some. You're going to have some people in that group are going to be like, who was the guy of the Tour de France guy? You know, one of the, some super duper rider dude, right? I was going to say Greg LeMond, but that's not a guy you know.
I don't think I could tell you anybody.
Yeah, it's not as big as it was the following for the Tour de France. Anyway, they ride a lot longer than 60 miles a day. So, but I think there would be some people that would really zip ahead.
Yep.
And there would be some people that would be slackers with lots of little kids, or not slackers, maybe dragging little kids along. And I don't know. I think it would spread out. You'd probably meet some friends. I think the problem would be is if you're riding along with somebody, and it's like anywhere you're going with somebody. If you make good friends on the way, it's great fun. But if it's not working, then there could be some awkwardness. But
and we've met a couple of good friends on that Erie Canal trip.
Yes.
I think our best friend on that trip was Pizza Jesus.
Pizza Jesus. Yeah. So we came in. So one of the adages that we had while we were going was to make sure we never went backwards, and you had to violate that when I made you go back to get the map.
Yep.
Okay. Well, keep in mind. Okay, I could have gone back to get the map, but you would have had to ride on the tandem with Olivia. All right, and that was a thing that was like, you and I are not exactly the same size. We would have had to reconfigure the bikes. It would have been
it just would have taken too long.
Yeah. So you went back to get that, but when we got to one of these little towns, we needed lunch, right?
Sure, as everyone does.
Right, and we were like, well, we need to get somewhere to eat, and we were sitting there trying to figure out, if we go down this little street in the town, we might find a restaurant, or that little street in the town. But I thought, well, there's a shop up there. I want to go. Maybe we should go there. But this one looks pretty good. So you play that game of a bird in the hand, two in the bush kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. If you stop at the first thing you see, then that means you're stopping at the quick.
Then you miss everything. But if you risk going all the way to the end, then you might have accidentally picked the worst choice.
Right. Or you actually maybe the next thing you know, you're outside of town, and you're like, you missed it. So you're stuck at the Quick Trip again.
That's right.
And with peanut butter crackers or Fig Newtons or something. So we were sitting there. If I remember this right, okay, you and I and Olivia were kind of standing there looking, which way should we go? And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this guy appears behind us on a bike.
Yep.
All right, and doesn't he say, "Are you looking for somewhere for lunch?" Isn't that what he said? Something like that?
More or less. Like, what are you guys sitting here for? Or are you guys looking for a place to eat?
Yeah, and we said, yeah, we're trying to figure out where to go for lunch. And he goes, if you go right down there, there's a pizza shop just on the left. And we were like, thank you, sir. And he was like, no problem. He started pedaling off, and we started pedaling off, and we pulled over right there, and there was this pizza shop. And I went to turn to him and to say thank you. Boom, he was just gone.
He just disappeared.
He just got assumed up. He just disappeared. It was like, that was Pizza Jesus.
And he told us exactly what we needed at exactly the right time, and all of our prayers were answered.
He gave us bread to eat. It was phenomenal. And then, do you remember Trail Angel?
Not as much.
Okay, so Trail Angel, it was later on, and I think Olivia and I were ahead of you maybe a little bit, and we were trying to figure out, because we had cut through this town and we had to pick up the trail on the other side of town, and we're biking along, and we had stopped and we were looking at the map, and then you pulled up and we were trying to figure out where it was, looking at the GPS. We're looking at the map. I don't think we had cell phones it was like 8 years ago. I don't think I had Google Maps on my phone. And this lady comes by biking. Do you remember in The Wizard of Oz where the witch lady is, whoever that is, she rides her bicycle very slowly with the basket on the front. Now this lady was not like a witch, but she rode her bike like the witch does, okay? Very slowly, and I think she might have even had an animal in the basket. I don't remember. And she was biking along, and very slowly, and then she looks over to us, like on the other side of the street, and she says, "Are you looking for the trail?" And we were like, "Yes, how'd you know?" And she said, "Follow me." And we did, and we followed her down the road, and then she said, "Here it is," and she turned into the trail. We were like, "Hey, great." And we turned into the trail, boom, she was gone. It was remarkable. We had Pizza Jesus and the Trail Angel over the course of like 2 days. It was a remarkable ride across New York State. And I tell you, that is some lovely country if you've never been up there. You go through some old industrial towns, which are maybe less, but you know, it's historic. It's upstate New York. We get hit by some thunderstorms. We found some great ice cream shops. We had a great time biking the Erie Canal from Buffalo to Albany. And so we drove up to Buffalo, right? And then we put our bikes in the hotel. Then we drove to the Buffalo airport and we parked the car at the airport, right?
Yeah. Because we biked to the airport, and then I sat there with the bicycles.
Oh no! Wait. No,
sorry, Buffalo, not Albany.
Yeah, Buffalo, right. So we drove there, and then we drove to the airport, parked the car at the airport, and then we got the shuttle bus from the airport back to the hotel, right?
Yep.
And then we then we biked over here to Albany, and then we got to Albany. We rented a van at the Albany airport, and then we loaded the bikes in the van and drove back to the other airport in Buffalo, and we unloaded the bikes at the car we had left. Then we returned the van we had rented in Albany. It was just a one-way rental, and dropped it off at the other airport. And then they took us by a shuttle bus back to the parking lot where the car was, and then we drove home. And you know what? I forgot to fill that van with gas before we dropped it off.
Well, there's an extra $40 out your pocket.
I don't remember how much it was, but I don't think I told them, and I don't think they ever asked. And I don't remember the bill, so I'm not sure it came through or not. Anyway, it was, but that was a great one. And if you get a chance to do it, do it. They're wonderful. These trails. All right, so the Monon Trail here I mentioned before runs through Indianapolis, and that railroad used to go from Chicago in the north to Louisville in the south, or from Michigan City, Indiana, down to Indy, and those two routes would meet in a little tiny town in Indiana called Monon, Monon.
All right.
And hence the name, the Monon Railway. And the south term, well, it goes down south toward Louisville, and then there's a branch line that goes to French Lick, Indiana.
All right.
Do you know French Lick, Indiana?
Not quite.
That's where Larry Bird's from.
See, this is why we need Zach on the podcast more often.
We should have Zach. Well, you know what? When he gets back to us, he will be back to us. So anyway, he would know that. He'd be like, "Yeah, French Lick, dude, Larry Bird."
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Yeah. But anyway, so the Monon no longer runs, and there's pieces of the track that are used by CSX, Bob, the chassis system, right? And so there are pieces that are still in there, but most of it has been either abandoned or turned into, or abandoned and turned into trails or other kinds of things. There are beautiful bridges over the rivers. There's I don't know if there's any tunnels here in Indiana there, but the Monon used to hit 6 different universities on its route.
Okay, so which 6?
It hit Purdue in West Lafayette.
Makes sense.
Wabash College in Crawfordsville, Indiana.
Okay.
DePauw, which is in Greencastle. And in fact, when DePauw used to play Wabash in football, they would play for the Monon Cup.
See, it all wraps together.
Yes, it does. Okay, and then Indiana University in Bloomington, Butler here in Indy, and then St. Joseph's College down there in Rensselaer or however you say it. I'm sure they say it different than they do in New York, but that was what the Monon did. But this trail, Harry, this is great. It's about 20 miles, and it goes from north of where we are. We're up in Westfield, so north of that, up another 3 or 4 miles is Sheridan, which is this little tiny town, and that is the current trailhead for the bicycle part that goes to Indy. And you ride from that. You kind of go southeast, and you go ride right along US 31 for a long time, down through Westfield over these. They've built these big bridges over the major roads, 146th Street. And Indiana Highway 32, big bridges that say Monon. It's big. It's a great publicity thing. They've done great marketing with this, and it takes you all the way into downtown Indy. But for me, it's important because when you get to Broad Ripple, you get on the Canal Trail. There's a Canal Trail in Indy, right?
You and your canal trails.
Yeah, well, this is the canal. Who's that punter guy who used to be with the Colts and now he's got the podcast?
Oh, McAfee.
Pat McAfee. Okay, Pat McAfee apparently got arrested for swimming in that canal back in the day.
Checks out.
Back in the day. So you can ride the canal trail, but the canal trail goes from you know what? I'm starting to think right now. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, we missed our opportunity to invite Pat McAfee onto our podcast.
Oh no, we haven't missed it yet. When he finds out that we're talking about his canal swim, he'll jump at the chance to come on.
That's right. He'll hit us up.
Yeah, that's really do it when to come on. We're like, yeah, we'll see if we can squeeze you in. Yeah. So, but then it goes down and goes through Butler University there, and it's a beautiful area. It goes through the gardens down there, and it goes along the canal. And then I get off at 30th or 38th Street, one of those things down there, and I'm about 2 miles from your sister's house. Wonderful. So it is. It is a great one. And the Monon, I didn't mention this, okay? The Monon rail line is mentioned in the movie Hoosiers.
Yeah, and it's been ages since I've seen Hoosiers.
Well, it is okay, so you know the film, right? Is about a basketball team in Indiana. In the old days, Indiana used to have a single state tournament. All right, so all the schools, there weren't like 6A and 5A and 10Z or whatever. There was one state champion, and that's all they had. And in 1954, little Milan High School went to the state championship and won it. Okay, and this is kind of a retelling of that story, but the names have been changed to protect the innocent, and it's been doctored up to make it good for TV. But you know what's interesting? When Milan went to the state finals and won it that year, I mean, you think about it. All the schools in the state are in one tournament. It's got to be like 250. How many rounds is that? It's got to be like 8 or 9 rounds. It's a big tournament, okay? Along the way, they played Crispus Attucks High School, which is a high school in Indianapolis. And Crispus Attucks, do you know who Crispus Attucks is?
No, see, I'm not qualified for this podcast.
See, I don't. This is a thing that I knew this, and I had to go look it up because I was like, where? I know this name. Crispus Attucks is considered one of the first 5 people killed in the American Revolutionary War. He was one of the 5 guys who was shot at the Boston Massacre. Okay. All All right, so the lesson of the Boston Massacre is don't taunt people who have weapons. Okay, that's the fundamental lesson. All right, but Crispus Attucks was an African American guy. All right, he was a freeman in Boston, and he was shot. He was in this crowd. And Crispus Attucks is a high school in Indianapolis here. And on that Crispus Attucks team that the Milan team beat on the way to the state championship was none other than Oscar Robertson. All right, who went on to play
professional basketball.
So, yeah, he was an NBA guy. He won a championship with the Bucks in '71 with Lou Alcindor, who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So it all comes together, right? It all comes together, and then there's Larry Bird. So, okay, but in the movie Hoosiers, when Coach Norm shows up at the first day of practice, there's the guy who's the bad coach.
Yeah.
All right, it's George, and he's telling him things like, "You can't score if you don't shoot. Fire it up from outside." He's giving him all this terrible advice, and Norm shows up and says, "Hey, let's give me the ball. You're out of here." And George is really upset, and he says, "I don't know why Cletus drug your old tired bones in here. He must have owed you something fierce. Fact is, mister, you start screwing up this team, and I'll personally hide strap your ass to a pine rail and send you up the Monon line." So, and I didn't know that was in there. I had forgotten. I knew that quote was in there, but I didn't know they talked about the Monon line. And I guess when I saw that film in 1986 or whenever it was, when it came out, I had no idea there was a Monon. But now you guys know this, okay? You guys podcasters, you know the Monon line runs through Indiana. It is the Indiana rail line. And getting your ass hide strapped to a pine rail instead of the is a thing you don't want to do, but you don't have to worry that anymore because now you can do it on your bike.
That's right, and you can go see who you want to go see and do it on your own terms.
Oh, that's all right. You know what? All right, that's where we're going to wrap it up. Harry, what do you think? Rail trails, sum it up.
Yeah, I wanted to get your opinion first. And
okay.
We always talk about being the good, spreading the good,
seeking
the good.
Yep.
What, in your opinion, is good about rail trails?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I want to go to be a little bit more serious now. There's a couple of things that are really great. Okay, so I've been reading a lot about urban architecture and urban planning, and there's a lot about what happens in American cities now with zoning and stuff that makes it really hard to live in a city if you are not a car. Okay, American cities are built for cars. That's it. That's
100%. Yeah.
And I love my car. I love my truck, and that's a great thing. But there are times and places like people love cities that they can live more human scale. I think. And rail lines provide the transportation you need when you're living in a non-automobile environment. And when we live in an automobile environment now, the remnants of these rail trails provide us a connection to the past there, but they also give us the ability to do human scale things like ride bicycles in an arena that is mostly automobile focused. And I look at, like, on a Saturday in the summer, when you're on this trail, it is packed with people. Going to, I talk about ice cream a lot, but people go to ice cream a lot. They go up and down to the ice cream shops. When you go through downtown Carmel, there's like shops along the trail everywhere. There are beautiful small apartments along the trail area. There's a park. There's an outdoor table tennis table there just waiting to be played. And I keep thinking I should stop here and just...
Well, you got to strap your paddles to the back of your bike and go.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm thinking of doing that. Like stopping one time to take all comers. I'll take anybody. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, there you go.
The beach
old man in the park.
I'll hide strap your ass to pine rails. So
back to where you came from.
That's right. But it really provides a human scale endeavor in a large city, and it gives you a chance. And Zach and I have talked about this before, of getting back to nature, getting out into the world without, I love to hike too, but hiking's pretty slow. All right. And if you don't have a week or multiple days to do things, A bike gives you a lot more space, a lot more distance you can cover, but it doesn't give it at the speed where you can't appreciate it. You can stop. It's low energy. It's low effort. It doesn't. You can do it a lot cheaper than a car. You can get a decent bike for a couple $100. You can get a really expensive bike for a couple $1,000. But if you're just a person zippity-doo-dah down the trail, it's a wonderful way to get out and see areas of the town you might like. I drive the parts through Indianapolis I never normally see, because when I go downtown I take the major roads, and it goes through little subdivisions, and I keep
see tiny little airports within the woods.
I told you that, right? There's this little airstrip at our house. I showed that to my mom the other day. She was like, "That's an airstrip?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I thought that was just like a big lawn." I was like, "No, that's an airstrip." And if you look at the Google photos, you can see the little windsock going. So that's what's good about rail trails. I love rail trails, and I'm a big supporter of rail trails. And you can be like that too. And that's what's good about rail trails.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think for me, though, the biggest thing is because we kind of grew up biking, more or less, right? And I'm sure you took that from what you were doing up in Norwalk and Sparta and everywhere else in southwestern Wisconsin. We kind of did it in Raleigh, did a couple other just normal bike trails in Virginia, the bike trail up in New York. It's all good things, and they're all good family things to do. And if we're out here seeking the good and being the good, I think there's no greater good than extending these influences and positive experiences upon your family.
That's exactly right. That's the way to say it, Harry. I thank you very much for joining me tonight. And we're going to thank Zach in absentia for doing the cleaning up of this episode, because I'm sure he's going to need some. But in the meantime, all you guys out there, you know the tagline: seek the good, be the good, spread the good, enjoy the adventure of life.